George Lindsay, known as Goober Pyle on the Andy Griffith Show, was beloved for his goofy charm and warm smile. But behind the scenes, not everything was as friendly as it seemed. Lindsay held a grudge that lasted decades against his co-star, Francis Bavier, who played the sweet Aunt Bee. The two actors, who seemed to fit perfectly into the peaceful world of Mayberry on screen, shared a real-life moment that left Lindsay deeply hurt and unforgiving. This clash revealed a surprising side to their relationship and left questions about how one event could have such an impact. But before we get into why he hated her, we need to go back to his life before the Andy Griffith Show. George Lindsay was born on December 17, 1928, in Fairfield, Alabama, a small town with simple roots. His parents, George Ross Lindsay, a butcher, and Alice Smith, raised him with traditional Southern values. He spent a lot of his childhood in Jasper, Alabama, living with his grandparents, which he often said gave him a sense of hard work and humility. Growing up, George wasn't all about acting right away. He loved sports, especially football, and became the quarterback for his high school team at Walker County High. After graduating in 1946, George headed to Kemper Military School in Missouri and then to Florence State Teachers College, where he majored in physical education and biology. Imagine that, he wasn't initially set on becoming an actor at all. But life has a funny way of steering us, and George found himself drawn to the stage during college plays. After graduating in 1952, George joined the United States Air Force and got stationed at Ramey Air Force Base in Puerto Rico. Those years in the military were crucial for him. They taught him discipline and gave him stories he'd later share on stage as a comedian. When he finished his service, he moved back to Alabama and briefly taught at Hazel Green High School. But his dreams were bigger than a small-town life, so he set his sights on New York City. George wanted to get into the American theater wing, which was a big deal for actors, and by 1956, he was accepted. New York opened up new doors for George, but it didn't come without its struggles. He had to work hard, taking whatever roles he could find. In 1960, he even appeared on To Tell the Truth, a TV quiz show, as a nightclub comic who loved spear fishing. It was a quirky, fun way to make his way into the entertainment world, showing off his personality and humor that people would later adore. After finishing up with the American theater wing, George landed a few roles in Broadway productions like Wonderful Town and All-American, but his big break was still a few years away. So, in 1962, he took a leap and moved to Los Angeles, aiming for the stars in Hollywood. He started landing small roles on popular TV shows like Gunsmoke, The Rifleman, and even The Twilight Zone. Bit by bit, George was proving himself in Hollywood. Then, in 1964, he was cast as Goober Pyle on the Andy Griffith Show, which changed everything. Alright, let's dive into the story behind the Andy Griffith Show and the surprising tension between George Lindsay, who played Goober Pyle, and Francis Bavier, better known as the beloved Aunt Bee. From the outside, Mayberry looked like a perfect place where everyone got along, but real life behind the scenes had its own share of drama. George Lindsay joined the Andy Griffith Show in 1964 as Goober Pyle, a lovable and quirky mechanic who could always make people laugh with his goofy antics and oddball charm. Goober was the cousin of Gomer Pyle, played by Jim Nabors, who had already become a fan favorite. Lindsay was great at giving Goober that simple, good-natured style, playing up his funny expressions and famously awkward Cary Grant impression, which fans loved. But as friendly and carefree as his character was, the atmosphere off-screen didn't always match up with what you saw on TV. Francis Bavier, who played Aunt Bee, was known for being the sweet, motherly figure who always had a kind word and a warm meal ready for her friends and family. But according to those who worked with her, Francis wasn't exactly the same as her TV persona. In fact, she was known for being pretty reserved and often kept to herself. She rarely mingled with her co-stars and didn't have the warmest relationship with everyone on set, especially not with George Lindsay. From the start, she seemed to have a strict sense of professionalism that didn't always mix well with the more relaxed, joking attitude of the other actors. George Lindsay talked about this in his memoir, Goober in a Nutshell, published in 1995. He wrote that Francis took her role very seriously and often struggled with the fun, casual atmosphere that the cast enjoyed. For example, Lindsay loved to joke around between takes. He'd get into goofy conversations, tell silly stories, and throw in some colorful language now and then, all in good fun to pass the time on set. But Francis did not approve of his style. She expected a more serious, respectful setting, and all the joking and casual talk on set didn't sit well with her. Lindsay described her as somewhat rigid, wanting things done a certain way and finding it hard to go with the flow when the others were just trying to have a good time. Then came the day on Mayberry R.F.D., the spin-off of the Andy Griffith Show, that changed everything between Lindsay and Bavier. The show was filming an episode called The Racehorse, where Aunt Bee had a prominent role. George Lindsay was doing his usual thing, joking around and maybe even using a few choice words. He was relaxed and playful, like he usually was. But this time, it struck a nerve with Francis. She didn't just give him a look or a quiet comment. She went right up to him and scolded him, and then, to everyone's surprise, she hit him over the head with her umbrella. According to Lindsay, it wasn't just one whack either. She struck him twice, hard enough that the umbrella actually bent. That moment was shocking for everyone on set, especially for Lindsay, who felt humiliated and upset. The incident didn't just affect Lindsay's mood that day, it left a lasting mark on him. In his book, he wrote about feeling incredibly embarrassed, especially because other people on set had witnessed it. He never expected Francis to take things so far, and it created a rift between them that he claimed never healed. Ken Barry, who played Sam Jones on the show, was also upset about it. He felt Bavier's reaction was way out of line and said that George hadn't done anything to deserve such a harsh response. It wasn't that George disliked Francis before this, he actually respected her as an actress. But after that day, he admitted that he never forgave her for the way she had treated him. And this incident wasn't a one-off moment for Francis. Other members of the cast and crew had their own stories of struggling to work with her. For example, Howard Morris, who played the character Ernest T. Bass and directed some episodes, found it challenging to work with Francis. He once described it as stepping on a landmine whenever he had to direct her. He knew he had to be extremely careful with instructions because if he asked her to move a few steps or change her position slightly, she could become upset quickly, creating tension on the set. Sheldon Leonard, the executive producer, also found her to be the most difficult person in the cast to work with, even though he recognized her talent. The strange thing about Francis Bavier was that she seemed to feel the weight of her reputation, too. She knew that her Aunt Bee character was beloved by audiences, but she also knew that she was not like Aunt Bee in real life. In an article from 1966, she even said that Aunt Bee was so much nicer than she was, acknowledging the differences between herself and the character. It was something she struggled with, and it may have contributed to her keeping her distance from the rest of the cast. Later in life, she revealed that this inner conflict over her role as Aunt Bee had become so tough that she eventually went to a psychiatrist for help. As the years went on, Francis's behavior continued to keep her apart from her co-stars. When Mayberry R.F.D. started its third season, she was no longer part of the show. There wasn't much of an explanation given on screen. Sam, Goober, and Howard simply mentioned that Aunt Bee had gone to visit her sister and wouldn't be back anytime soon. In reality, though, it seems that her tense relationships with cast members, especially Lindsay, had contributed to her departure. Without Aunt Bee, the show moved forward, but her absence was felt by fans who loved her character. Even after the show ended, Francis kept her distance from her old co-stars. In 1986, when Andy Griffith and Ron Howard, who played Little Opie, decided to pay her a surprise visit, she refused to see them. She told them that it was because she hadn't been given notice of their visit, but many believed there was more to it, that she wanted to keep her old life as Aunt Bee separate from her real life. However, toward the end of her life, Francis did make one last gesture. She called Andy Griffith and expressed regret for being difficult to work with during the show. She apologized for her behavior, which gave Griffith some closure. Unfortunately, George Lindsay never received a similar apology, and if he had, he surely would have included it in his memoir. For George, that unresolved tension stayed with him long after the show ended. He held on to that moment, feeling it was unfair and unnecessary. Even though the Andy Griffith Show was a huge part of his life, bringing him fame and fan admiration, the memory of that umbrella incident and Francis's reaction overshadowed much of the good memories he had of working on set. Lindsay was loved by fans for his character and his own warm personality, but behind the scenes, he carried the weight of that one unexpected moment with Bavier. But here's another story about George Lindsay that might just blow your mind. He was reportedly considered for the role of Spock on Star Trek. Yes, Goober Pyle, the funny, simple mechanic from Mayberry, could have been Mr. Spock, the logical, serious Vulcan on the Starship Enterprise. This bit of trivia is surprising, right? It came to light during an interview segment of TV Land's 4th anniversary Star Trek marathon in 2006. Leonard Nimoy, who famously played Spock, mentioned that Gene Roddenberry, the creator of Star Trek, had considered George Lindsay for the role. The way Nimoy said it made some people wonder if he was joking, but there's more to back this up. Ernest Borgnine, the star of McHale's Navy, wrote in his autobiography, Ernie, that Lindsay himself had told him he turned down the role. Borgnine's exact words were, "My hand to God, he turned down the part of Mr. Spock on TV's Star Trek." Imagine that, George Lindsay with his trademark goober smile and Alabama drawl playing the ultra-serious Spock. It feels almost impossible to picture, right? But in a way, it makes sense. Before Lindsay found fame as Goober, he had a life full of unexpected twists. He was a college quarterback, a high school teacher, and even taught science for a while. So, seeing him in a role where he'd use his real-life teaching and scientific background isn't too far-fetched. If you're wondering how the idea even came about, it's interesting to know that the Andy Griffith Show and Star Trek shared some ties beyond their shared filming lot at 40 acres in Culver City, California. You could even spot places like Floyd's barber shop in the Star Trek episodes Miri and City on the Edge of Forever. But casting George Lindsay as Spock would have been an entirely different connection between the two shows. It's funny to think about what might have been. Lindsay's Goober had a knack for lighthearted, goofy comedy, while Spock was known for his straight face, sharp logic, and emotionless presence. Would audiences have taken to Spock if Lindsay played him? Would he have put a bit of that southern charm into the role? Maybe we would have seen Spock do a Goober dance on the bridge of the Enterprise. Okay, maybe not, but the thought of Lindsay playing one of the most iconic sci-fi characters ever is wild. In the end, the role went to Leonard Nimoy, who made Spock the legendary character we all know. But for George Lindsay, the fact that he was even considered shows that he was much more than just the goofy mechanic from Mayberry. He had a range that surprised even his closest friends and fans. Just imagine if he'd chosen differently, we might remember George Lindsay in a whole new way today. But even without Spock, George's career was filled with memorable moments. After the Andy Griffith Show wrapped up, George Lindsay stayed with his character Goober in the spin-off, Mayberry R.F.D. The show kept the small-town charm of the original series, and fans loved seeing familiar faces, including Goober, as they carried on the legacy of Mayberry. Lindsay played Goober until CBS decided to cancel the show in 1971. Even after Mayberry R.F.D. ended, Lindsay didn't slow down. He kept popping up on TV, playing characters that were a mix of comedy and toughness. In 1972, he played Charlie, a highwayman, in an episode of Gunsmoke called Blind Man's Bluff, and took on the role of an escaped convict known as the Dove in The Rifleman. These parts showed that George had more range than people might have thought, proving he could bring grit and depth when needed. Disney also saw something special in George Lindsay. He lent his voice to a few beloved animated movies. If you listen closely, you can catch his voice in the Aristocats as Lafayette the dog. He also played Trigger, one of the Vulture henchmen in Robin Hood, and had a role in The Rescuers as one of the Swamp Mice. Kids and families who watched these classics might not have realized it, but Goober was right there in their favorite movies, bringing laughter in his own way. One of George Lindsay's biggest long-term roles was on Hee Haw, a show that perfectly matched his roots and sense of humor. From 1972 to 1992, George played Goober again, but with a twist. This time, Goober was a bit wiser, a little more country, and fit right in with the barnyard jokes and musical performances. Hee Haw kept George in the spotlight for 20 years, connecting him with both new fans and those who remembered him from Mayberry. Outside of acting, George had a full personal life. He married Joanne Herbert, and they had 2 children, George Jr. and Camden Joe Lindsay Gardner, plus 2 grandsons. Although his marriage ended in divorce, George found companionship later in life with Nashville businesswoman Ann Wilson, who stayed by his side until he passed away. On May 6, 2012, George Lindsay died from heart failure at the age of 83 in Nashville, Tennessee. He was laid to rest at Oak Hill Cemetery in Jasper, Alabama, the town where his journey had started. Beyond acting, George's heart was set on giving back. He raised over $1 million for the Alabama Special Olympics over 17 years through his George Lindsay Celebrity Weekend and Golf Tournament in Montgomery. He also helped raise $50,000 for the Alabama Association of Citizens, and he didn't just raise money, he played an active role, even serving as head coach for the Winter Games in the Minneapolis Special Olympics national competition. George's commitment showed that he truly cared about helping others, especially kids with special needs. Education was important to him. He set up the George Lindsay Academic Scholarships at the University of North Alabama, where he had once been a student. In recognition of his work and his connection to the school, the university awarded him an honorary doctorate in 1992. His hometown of Jasper even honored him by naming a highway after him, a testament to how much he was loved and respected in Alabama. George earned many honors throughout his life. In 1995, he received the Governor's Award of Achievement from the Alabama Music Hall of Fame. In 1997, he got the Minnie Pearl Lifetime Achievement Award, which was special because it came from a fellow country entertainment legend. Then, in 2007, he received the first Icon Award from the Nashville Association of Talent Directors. On top of all that, George started the George Lindsay UNA Film Festival at the University of North Alabama in 1998, a tradition that continues to celebrate filmmakers each year. So, while most people remember George Lindsay as the silly, lovable goober, his life was much richer than just one role. From potential space traveler Spock to voice acting for Disney and his tireless charity work, George lived a life full of unexpected twists and heartfelt contributions. He's remembered not just for the laughs he brought but for the kindness he spread along the way. If you enjoyed this video, please subscribe to our channel, The Celebrity X Files, for more documentaries like this. Thank you for watching.